fairly exploiting the current situation.
It is the kind of exploitation no one likes to see. We're told, though, very isolated incidents. Well, U.S. stock markets are not going to reopen before Friday. Bond trading, though, is scheduled to resume on Thursday.
Meantime, stocks are trading in Asia at this hour, and Maggie Lake is standing by live in our New York bureau. She has all the numbers for us. Maggie.
Hey, Maggie.
Jim, for global financial markets, the focus is now on Asia. We're looking to see whether the markets there can stabilize. They took quite a hit on Wednesday. So far, they seem to have found their feet, helped in part by gains during the European session. If we take a look, Tokyo's Nikkei is trading up over 0.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is up over 1.5%. Only Singapore Straits Times lags behind, but it is only down marginally. So much better news there today. Now, as you mentioned, the U.S. stock markets will be closed on Thursday, but bond markets will resume regular trading at 8 a.m. Thursday. The Chicago Board of Trade and Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the country's two largest futures markets, said interest rate, foreign exchange, and commodity products would resume trade. Now, ideally, analysts would like to see all of the markets open together, but there is a feeling that some trade is better than none.
The bond market functions more appropriately and best when the stock market and the bond market are trading together, but we can certainly trade bonds without stocks for 24 to 48 hours.
And that's what they'll have to do. Now, there is an expectation that there will be a flight to quality into government bonds, the reliable government bonds, amid all of the uncertainty. But there are some questions about access and liquidity. Cantor Fitzgerald, the #1 market maker in bonds, was headquartered in the World Trade Center. From all reports we have so far, it seems they may have suffered substantial losses. Of their 1,000 employees, roughly 200 were accounted for. Now, we want to stress these are incomplete numbers, but the indications are very grim. As one trader put it, the bond market is in mourning. Cantor officials in Tokyo have said its electronic systems are completely intact. They have a data recovery system, but they say, quote, the people are irreplaceable. And that is a sentiment that is shared here on Wall Street. Well, let's go over to Richard Quest now in London for the latest in Europe. Richard?
Indeed, Maggie. David Buick of Cantor Fitzgerald will be joining us in the next hour to give us his reaction from the London point of view. He says also that our only real interest is at the families and our staff in New York. Everyone holds them very dear. European markets, after initially reacting sharply to the attack in New York, spent most of Wednesday quietly pondering what to do next. Trading volumes were much lower than usual. In some cases, they were reduced by half. No one wanted to be distracted from the events on the other side of the Atlantic. For investment banks in London, there was the awful reality that their colleagues in New York were directly involved, and perhaps some had been killed. Some companies have set up counselling for distressed employees.
A company has a profile, it functions a certain way, it has certain styles. And that is now going to be very, very confused. It almost will have to be reinvented. And they're not used to this. They're actually not used to dealing with a huge psychological impact. So they'll find it quite difficult. And I suspect they'll need a lot of help.
Now to events on Thursday. Officials at the European Central Bank will meet in Frankfurt to decide what more it can do to limit the global economic impact of the attack. There have been calls for European countries to cut interest rates to help stabilise the global economy. But when asked directly, the ECB President Wim Duisenberg said that was unlikely.
I think a quick move, as implied in your questions, would rather have inspired a reaction of panic than of stability and calmness.
On Wednesday, the world's central banks added more than $100 billion to the global financial system. In a coordinated move, the Bank of Japan, the European Central Bank, and the US Federal Reserve increased the supply of cash available. The infusion is designed to ensure that banks don't run short of money in the next few days. There are fears that the so-called credit crunch, with companies needing extra cash to tide them over during the difficult period. A quick look at what we're expecting from a European Open in just around 90 minutes' time. The FTSE and the DAX in Frankfurt are both expected to be just off a tad, down around 2 to 5 points, with the tech mark also up around about 5 points. That's the way the financial world looks from London. Colleen.
All right, Richard Quest, thank you very much. Well, information keeps pouring in on all aspects of this tragedy, including information law enforcement sources telling CNN maybe as many as 50 people involved in this whole attack. There's also been quite a bit of information on what was going on inside those hijacked planes.
And as we were telling everyone earlier, CNN did obtain a partial transcript of the cockpit comments that were heard from United Flight 93, but we're still piecing together what really happened at the controls of that, as well as, of course, the other 3 flights. Miles O'Brien wraps up that story.
Nothing seemed amiss when American Airlines Flight 11 left the runway in Boston Tuesday morning. The 767-200 was about half full, toting 81 passengers, a cockpit crew of 2, and 9 flight attendants to the opposite coast. The captain likely planned for a 5-hour flight, so there was roughly 8,500 gallons of jet fuel in its 3 tanks. FAA radars tracked the airliner as it followed the flight plan. But then, about 20 minutes into the flight, somewhere over upstate New York, it turned sharply to the south. Flight 11 was hijacked, apparently by knife-wielding men. Airline pilots are trained to handle such situations by keeping calm, complying with requests, and, if possible, dialing in an emergency 4-digit code on a device called a transponder. It transmits crucial flight data to air traffic controllers. The action takes seconds, but it appears no such code was entered. But in the cabin, a frantic flight attendant managed to use a phone to call American Airlines Command Center in Dallas. She reported the trouble. A pilot apparently keyed the microphone, transmitting a cockpit conversation. The hijackers could be heard saying, "We have more planes, we have more planes." Radio transmissions like this would have been recorded on the ground by the FAA.
The police have identified 5 suspects that they believe were involved with this terrorist act, and 2 of whom may be brothers, apparently, reportedly. 2 of whom, 2 others, may have flown in from Portland and originated in Canada.
About 5 minutes before Flight 11 started heading south, another 767, United Flight 175, left Boston, also for Los Angeles, 65 souls aboard. 15 minutes after becoming airborne, it veered off course. One passenger made 2 calls to his father. In one exchange, he said a flight attendant was stabbed. In the second call, he told his dad the plane was going down.
They knew not to carry guns on the airplane if they fired off a bullet. I mean, they could have had explosive decompression on the aircraft. They knew what they were doing, and they knew what their mission was, obviously.
We know what happened next. The 767 struck and ultimately leveled the World Trade Center's Twin Towers.
I know pilots. No, if you're going to die, you're not going to fly in a World Trade Center to do it. Yeah, there would be a struggle, major struggle.
By 8:20, the 3rd hijacked flight, American Flight 77, a 757, left Dulles Airport outside Washington, again bound for Los Angeles with 66 people on board. Radar tracking information on this flight obtained by CNN seems to indicate the transponder was turned off, which would have made it tougher to see on radar. We do know this. An hour and 20 minutes after departure, it plowed into the Pentagon. On board was Barbara Olson, a well-known attorney and frequent CNN legal commentator. Huddled in the back of the plane, Olson called her husband twice from her cell phone. She described the frantic scene.
She said that they were armed with knives and box cutters, cardboard cutters.
Even as the focus shifted to the nation's capital, a 4th plane, United Airlines Flight 93, bound for San Francisco out of Newark, takes a sudden 180-degree turn near Cleveland. More than one of the 38 passengers called their families to offer final goodbyes.
He said, I want you to know I love you very much, and I'm calling you from the plane. We've been taken over. There are 3 men that say they have a bomb. And then the phone went dead.
The 757 began homing in on the Washington area, its target unknown. But this flight did not make it that far, and this may be a clue why. One passenger, 31-year-old Jeremy Glick, called home from the doomed plane. He said the passengers were herded to the rear of the plane by a trio of hijackers armed with knives and a red box they say contained a bomb. When Glick's family confirmed what another passenger heard, that a plane had already struck the World Trade Center, Glick dropped the phone, then returned to tell his family the male passengers had taken a vote to attack the hijackers. Not long thereafter, Flight 93 crashed into a cornfield in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Pilots assessing this horrific sequence of events to a person believe the hijackers were in control of the 3 planes that hit their targets and that they must have been well schooled in aviation.
No, these people were well qualified on the airplane. They knew the systems, they knew the navigation, and they knew the flight management system, the computers, and they knew navigation. I mean, they went from Boston and right down to New York. I mean, they had to know which way to turn.
Miles O'Brien, CNN.
Well, that a look at the investigation, the probe of what actually happened. And as we round out this hour, we're going to return to New York City, where efforts to find the survivors go on despite the darkness.
Rescuers with dogs still digging through all of that rubble there as New Yorkers rally in grief, defiance, and solidarity as well. Garrick Utley, one more time, joins us again for the very latest from there. Garrick?
Yes, Colleen and Jim, one of the themes that's been going through our reporting here and elsewhere on CNN these past nearly 2 days now is how people, individuals and groups cope with the disaster. This evening we saw in Washington Square over here in Greenwich Village of Manhattan, the candlelight vigil. But other symbols of how people cope are also to be seen. One of the more interesting ones, and we really haven't seen this yet, occurs at least during daylight hours on the West Side Highway, which runs along the Hudson River here. It's the main artery in which the rescue teams come in and out. And what's happened is the growth of what you might call a spontaneous cheerleading team. Here's a report from our Jeannie Mose.
We've seen the bad news over and over, from above, from below.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me.
The doctor holding this camera did live, and now New Yorkers are saying we will survive. Guys driving bulldozers are getting the red carpet treatment.
Thank you!
New Yorkers, who sometimes treat camouflage as a fashion statement, are cheering the military.
Thank you, guys!
I was so touched when I first came around the corner and saw what was happening. I kept having to fight back tears.
I've been mesmerized by watching this on TV, and I wanted to come out and show my support.
This woman used to have a view of the Twin Towers from her apartment. Now the skyline has too much sky.
It reminds me of when somebody loses their 2 front teeth or something, and there's this void, and you feel like something should be there, but it's not.
I woke up this morning and I made this t-shirt, and I thought, that's just not enough. What else can I do?
Luke Littell ended up making a big thank you sign. Soon others joined in. Firemen tend to be favorites. But folks even cheered Con Ed, a utility.
Probably the only time that we'll ever see Con Ed trucks applauded.
The crowd applauded trucks full of debris and ash.
You see these flowers?
Yep.
That's for every truck that goes by that has ashes in it, because in those ashes is someone's family's family.
Some folks choked back tears. Others vented their anger.
I'm mad. That's what I am. I'm a Vietnam veteran. Mr. Bush, put the bombers up in the air. Get him. Just get him. Get him. Get him. Get him.
Some would like to get the towers rebuilt.
You can hurt us, you can keep us down, but you can't keep us down forever. And I think the rebuild would be a symbol to the world that the human spirit is alive and well here.
The spirits of those involved in the rescue effort seemed raised by the reception.
I think the people are great!
A moving reception for those who move the earth. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
And they will be moving it certainly for many months to come. Jim and Colleen, back to you.
Garrick Utley, thanks very much. Well, it is time for Jonathan Mann and Relisa Vasileva to step in and continue our coverage.
We're going to leave you now with some pictures of the all too familiar scene, the horrific scene that was Tuesday, September the 11th.
Stay with us.
Holy shit!